This is going to be a video regarding line of sight best practices importing custom map images. Now, by no means is this comprehensive, but I'll try to my best to convey the main points. Essentially, the real takeaway here is basically consistency, keeping your file sizes and the map dimensions down to a tolerable amount of size and room, because of there's different limitations in computing that we cannot avoid. I've seen a lot of pushback where individuals get frustrated because they'll make these huge maps using other programs and they'll import them into Fantasy Grounds, and what they might find is that when their players are connecting to their table, it's a little bit much for older computers, or if someone has bad internet, whatever the case may be. So it's not just a Fantasy Grounds issue. This is an issue of not understanding the limitations of compute and also the network and that sort of thing. So those sort of things do come into play. By no means do you have to follow the guides, but the Atlassian guides do provide a framework for formatting and what would be considered what Fantasy Grounds uses to keep the experience better for people. So they prioritize the experience over quality or size. And the maps I'm going to be using in this kind of this tutorial map thing is this is Mopsy's Map Mansion. I'll put his link at the end. But I had him build these maps for me a long time ago, and I've never used them. So I'm going to put those into Fantasy Grounds and put them to use and actually add some line of sight to them and kind of get into the principles of that sort of thing within Fantasy Grounds. And then if you need more assets for Fantasy Grounds and you don't have a lot, there is a map or like a asset subscription on the Fantasy Grounds website. So you can buy all these individual, or you can pay $50 a year to have access to all of them. So I think it's a pretty good deal. My only complaint on this type of thing is that the information in Fantasy Grounds is kind of hard to search for it. So if you don't know the content very well, it kind of makes it challenging. But nonetheless, there's a lot of really cool stuff. And they just added this immersive strongholds, which is like the walls and the 3D assets. So if you're trying to make like a dungeon or a castle or woodlands or haunted ruins, they have those now. And then I'd also like to mention that the guidelines are on the Atlassian guide. So there are links for that at the end of this video. So the developer guide, the product guidelines will kind of give you an idea of what the formatting and the size should be close to. So for instance, images or player maps, they recommend using WebP high quality 75% compression, under 4K, and then the actual, that's 4,000 by 4,000. And then if it's a static image, just a still image, maybe around 2 megs. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but, and then if it's an animated map, probably like under 10. So that the only way to really achieve that is this resolution and the dimensions of the map. And the reason they do this is just a general guideline for people who are creating modules. When you have a module that has several maps, they try to keep their adventure modules under 100 megabytes total. So that way, when you update or you go to download them, or you're sharing the images across the internet, it's a lot better experience. Now, for your own table, you obviously can up this up a little. I think I read somewhere that 6K is possible, but it also depends on the players connected to your table. So if you're the host and you're sharing a really big map file, it could cause performance issues. And that's the same across the board. So even if you use Foundry or Roll20, you'll still experience that ceiling eventually. Also, there's some stuff here for portraits, tokens, that sort of thing. So that's an important thing. And then that's under the developer guides. The other kind of tips and stuff is the line of sight style guide. So there's some basic user guides here, and under the basic guides, they talk about adding lights to maps and tokens, adding line of sight. So there's some best practices there. Here's a map line of sight style guide. So they go into, how to kind of go through and edit and create maps. So this is a nice starter, at least until you get used to the behavior of the map tools. So there's a lot of good resources out there if you want to improve your workflow and you want to be a little bit more optimal for Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to create a new campaign, and the thing I would like to point out here is this isn't necessarily going to be a game. This would be where I'm going to develop the maps. And that's an important concept that you learn early on in Fantasy Grounds. So a lot of us will start playing in a game or running a game, and then we're trying to build assets in the same session that we're playing in. There's a couple of problems with that. One is that you're doing it incrementally, and if you wanted to get a lot of work done, that's going to be spread out over time, which isn't bad, but if you're trying to get a lot of work done and you're just kind of making up as you go along, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not productive. It's more like you're doing it as needed type thing. If you're trying to do it like production, like you're actually trying to sell stuff and that sort of thing, then you probably want to make a work campaign. So that's what I'm going to do here to separate it from any of my games I'm playing in. That way I'm not holding up the game and I'm not taking a risk of corrupting the game. And then also I have a separate session that I can export. And then if I want to use the maps or the custom content in any of my other games, I'll have the ability to do so. So if you want more flexibility and less drama, you don't have to use a specific rule set for maps and images. Generally speaking, if you just use the core rules, that's probably your best bet, and those maps can be loaded in any campaign. You can go back after the fact and change that parameter, but if you build it in 5e, it's going to be for 5e unless you go in and change the XML data. So if you're going to do a bunch of images, tokens, maps, it's best to do it in like Core RPG, make it system agnostic. That way you can load it in Pathfinder, D&D, Savage Worlds, that sort of thing. The only time I ever really need to put it in 5e is if I want to test it. And that means that I have NPCs and character sheets and, that sort of thing. If you do it in the core rule set, you won't necessarily have that. So it's kind of what I use as a test case, and then I use the 5e rule set the most. So that's why I build it there. But if you're going to make a big project of just images and maps, I would just use the core rule set. You don't need a full-on developed rule set for that unless you plan on doing lots of testing and such. So what I'm going to do is set this up for LAN, local area network. It doesn't need to be on the cloud. I don't need a password. And I don't need any themes or anything, no extensions, nothing like that. So just the core rule set, nothing else. And then that to just kind of start. And I'm going to name this prefix. It's going to be 5e. And I'm going to say fantasy maps. And then I'm going to say work. Or you could say development or whatever. So work to me will let me know that this is not a game or campaign. This is kind of a workspace, so to speak, for creating maps. Now I might use the Fantasy Grounds Academy theme or something during my shows, but for doing a map thing, you don't really need all that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start. And while that's starting, I just wanted to mention that thanks all of you for watching and supporting the Fantasy Grounds Academy. There was some time there between Thanksgiving and Christmas where things were getting dodgy, and I had for our family. I mean, I didn't have money to pay bills, pay for Christmas, and all that. So I did a GoFundMe, and some of you guys had supported me during that. I really appreciate that, and I wanted to say Happy New Year to everybody. And also, I hope these videos help. I know I put in a lot of extra commentary, and it's not like a full-on tutorial. You got to remember, this is not professional. This is just me and how I interpret the Fantasy Grounds application based off of observations, experience, time, that sort of thing. I'm not perfect. I don't know everything, but I try to help people out if best I can, share my processes with you guys, that sort of thing. There are definitely people out there that are a lot more organized and focused than I am. And, if I wanted to spend hours editing videos and doing voiceovers and that kind of stuff, I would, but I don't really have the time to do that. Got a little bit of pushback occasionally when someone says, well, it'd be nice if you would add this or take away that or, get a more professional mic. And, I'm not really out to be a top streamer, that sort of thing. I'm just basically sharing my processes with the community and kind of just showing what I've learned over the years. So anyhow, so this is just a blank campaign. I really don't need any books, but if I want to test something later, I might want to load the NPCs up and move them around on a map or something. So I'm just going to load the older Legacy 2014 SRD. I don't need to load up anything else. This is just for the maps, and this is in case I want to test something out. That's it. Other than that, I don't need a rule set. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, hit next, and then finish. So I'm not going to change the dice and move, I don't need to do all that. I just need this workspace. Sometimes this decal is distracting for me. I don't know about some of you out there, but I'm going to go into options and clear that. I don't want that on there. I don't know why, but I like it clean, or I want it themed for something I'm working on, but I don't want some random picture back there. So background decal, use empty decal. So that's basically just going to wipe it clean. That's probably the only campaign or adjustments I'm going to make. Now let's get into the nitty gritty. So I have a collection of maps. This was some maps that I had paid for a few years ago, or maybe longer. And these are from Mopsy there. Mopsy's maps. He made these for me. And basically these were like a drow spider kind of thing. I was running an Underdark campaign, and I had commissioned him to build all these different maps. So I'm going to actually put these into Fantasy Grounds. But before I do that, I think that the important part here is this naming convention. So all of these are pretty aptly named. I think they're, they got pretty decent titles. But what I usually do is if it's a map asset, I'll put map underscore whatever it is. And that's something that you may want to get in the habit of, especially with Fantasy Grounds, because you don't want to basically lose track of your images. So that's kind of an important aspect of Fantasy Grounds, just so that you don't lose focus and that you also can search for these a lot easier. So I'll put map in front of it. And one reason I do that also is when you're displaying these in Fantasy Grounds. So if I go into Fantasy Grounds and go to campaign and images, you'll have this list of images here. And if you have a mixed bag, like we have handouts and artwork and NPCs and maps, if you put that prefix in there, it's going to sort through this list better. So they'll be in groups instead of a bunch of random titles. And then if you don't know the content well enough, you have to open up every image just to figure out what it is. So that's another reason why I do that. So take the time to rename the assets if you have them. And they also try to collect most, if not all, of your artwork before you even start. If you're doing this incrementally and you don't care, then that's fine. But for me, I like to have as many or all of the images ready to go before I even put them into Fantasy Grounds. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on for this first part of the video. It's a little boring, but it's actually very critical. If you do this stuff ahead of time, it saves you a lot of work, a lot of headache, and misery later on. So if you do this incrementally, as long as you keep a process or like a systematic way of doing this, it will help. It'll cut down a lot of frustration. But again, don't make more work for yourself, especially at the end when you're sitting there scrambling, trying to find files, and that sort of thing slows down your workflow quite a bit. So I usually spend the time in the beginning to do this. And here I got this spider token. I might do that one later, but for right now, I'm just going to do the map images. So I'm going to take, and these things here, I want to actually convert them to WebP. So as it stands, they are a JPEG file, and it looks like most of them are 1400 by 1400 dimensions. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because that is a decent size for Fantasy Grounds and for lower spec machines. So if you've got players with old integrated graphics or whatever, this will help mitigate how much of the lag and that sort of thing. So the other thing is the file size. These aren't too bad. These are like 1 to 2 megs, so these are fine as far as hard drive space goes. But when I convert these to WebP, that's going to compress that down even more. So I'm going to take these things here, and I'm going to add them to GIMP. So GIMP is a free image editor tool, and I've added a plugin that does a batch convert. So this batch image manipulation is called BIMP, and I'm using an older version of GIMP, so it should work. But basically, it's a plugin that allows you to add a bunch of files and then you convert them all at once. So once you have all your maps and they're renamed and everything, this is a handy tool. So I'm going to click on manipulation set, and the only thing I'm really going to be doing is change format and compression. So I'm going to use the drop down, go to WebP, and then image quality. Fantasy Grounds recommends 75%, but you don't have to. And that I'll leave it at that. Just leave everything else the same. Hit OK. And now I'm going to add images. So I'm going to add single images, so you can see what I'm doing. And then I will go through and basically go through and find out which images I want to add. So this is where I've downloaded the different images and maps that I have. So I wanted to find, let's see, so we're going to the D drive, going to downloads, and go to module, I believe it is. Nope, not that. Let me make sure I got the right directory. Okay, so this is under, oh, it's a different directory. So let me take that, and I'm going to change the path. And there we go. So I'm not, I guess I can also do the spider token while I'm here. So I'm just going to take all of these images from that folder and add those in. So this thing here, just going to click add, and that will take all of those images, the map images that I was showing earlier, and now I need to designate the output folder. So in this case, I don't want to output it on my storage drive, but I am going to output it to a secondary folder. So I'll just call this, I guess I'll just call them drow and spider maps, just so I have a directory. And that's in my downloads folder. So now I have the directory set up. So I got the formatting, I've got all the files that I want to convert, and now I'm going to hit apply. And what that'll do is go through and take each image and convert it to WebP in this case. You got to be careful with really large images. I've tried to convert images that are like 8K or whatever, really huge images. It can take a little bit. It's even froze my computer. So that's how hard those are on your system, even with a high-end computer. I mean, this computer that I have is probably about a medium grade. I think it's an Intel i7. I've got 64 gigs of RAM. I've got a decent video card. But even with that, it's still really hard on it. So once I'm done, I can hit close, and I'll close this app for right now to free up system resources. And then these maps were the originals, so I'm just going to close that. And then I need to go into where I exported them to, which is my secondary drive. So I took them off my storage drive and converted them over and put them in this in my downloads folder. So this is something that you'll have to go through when you want to manage, or basically when you want to do stuff to convert, is keep everything kind of, keep it organized, in other words. So let me make sure I did this right. Okay, that's downloads. Pretty sure I told it to go there. Well, let me try spider, because I know that. Spider cave. Here, cave of the giant spiders. Wow. So what did I do here? Let's see. Open file location. Huh? It must have just went into the... Yeah, I don't know what I did here, but they're all down here. So that was kind of a mess. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So they didn't go into a subfolder like I hoped, but that's all right. All right, so what is this? Okay, so I'm going to grab all of these. Yeah, it looks like it did it twice or something. I don't know what the heck happened here. I'll have to sort that out once I get these over to Fantasy Grounds. Because this is where you can go wrong for sure. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those out. And then in the back end of Fantasy Grounds, I'm going to go into the assets. So you go in our library, assets, and now you got some choices up here. So one's for tokens, portraits, and images. So you're going to click on the images. And when you're actually in a campaign, if you click on folder, it's going to take you to the campaign folder, whatever you called your campaign, and an image subfolder. So I'm going to go ahead and set these over here. And I don't want the JPEG files. So that's what we converted from. So I don't need those. And now we have this kind of this hierarchy here of maps. And let me change it so we can view the, there we go. So those are the images. They're now converted. They're WebP. So without converting it, the entire folder would have probably been around 10 megabytes. Let's see what it is now. So I'm going to go and create a new folder, like a subfolder, and I'll just say spider maps. And take all of these and move those in there. In case I want other collections of maps, I don't want them all in the same folder. Okay, so there's that. Let's see how much space or size that is. So that is 2.7 megs, whereas before, if I would have left them as JPEGs, they probably would have been about 8 or 9 megabytes total. So that helps keep the file size down, especially if you're making a really big project. That really helps with the overall file size of the module and for storage. So it doesn't have a ton of impact on the performance, except for if you got a huge map that's like a gig or something like that, and you're transferring it over, it takes a minute to transfer it from your machine to your players. But the real thing that matters is the actual dimensions. So if I hover over these, all of these are 14 by 14. So your maximum is 4,000 by 4,000. So these are 1,400 by 1,400. So that's kind of the guidelines that they put in place, so that if you're creating maps or you're finding maps online, try to make sure they're in that zone. If they start getting up over 5 or 6K, it's really going to put your players and yourself kind of at a disadvantage. So you might still work on your machine, but once you share it with your players, it might crash or freeze up or whatever it's going to do. All right, so that's the main thing. So organizing, converting, making sure the sizes are correct, put them in the correct directories and folders. So once you have all your artwork, if you have that capability or you're able to, there's a couple ways you can do this. So whenever you make changes to Fantasy Grounds, you want to make sure you hit this refresh folder assets. And the first time you do this, it'll add a subfolder called campaign. And then here's the actual maps themselves. And you'll get the thumbnail previews at this point. So what I like to do is do subfolders of different types of maps. That way, when this is being created, this view, it's not going to take Fantasy Grounds, 30 seconds or whatever. It's a lot shorter to create, 10 thumbnails as opposed to hundreds. And I think that's where a lot of us have issues with managing assets is you'll have a folder that has like more than 50 items. And when Fantasy Grounds goes to open that folder in this view, it has to not only check the files and all that stuff, but it has to create these thumbnails to show you what's like a preview of what's in the folder. So these are preview images or thumbnails. So whenever you have a gazillion assets, like hundreds and thousands of them, that really slows things down. So put them in subfolders will help reduce that somewhat. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, but it's better than showing every single map on your hard drive, that sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and once I have those as part of the campaign, you can open these up and individually add them to your campaign or to your project, or you can import them en masse, like in a big group, and do it all in one shot. So what I'm going to do is show you that. So just in case you have more than one or two images. So I want to go into images. And the first thing I do when I make custom content generally is I'll use the drop down menu, and I'm going to click on this green plus button. That's going to make a new category. And then I will click on the edit list, which is this little pencil, and I'm going to call this spider maps. And then click the edit button again, and now I have a new category. So you do that to keep everything organized, and also it makes it easier to sort in Fantasy Grounds. So once you have your own group made, you can drag and drop these in one at a time if you want, or you can go to the preview mode and create map record. You can do it that way. Or if you want to do it all in one fell swoop, you can click on create from campaign assets. So that'll not only add this, but other images as well. So if I had different subfolders, it would add everything. So you got to make sure that, if you're going to do it this way, you got to make sure everything's organized. But since I only have the spider maps and I don't really have anything else to worry about, I'll go ahead and click on create from campaign assets. So I'll go ahead and click that. And it says, are you sure you want to do this? And I'll say yes. So now all of those images are in here without having to do it one at a time. So there's ways you can do it in groups, or you can do it individually, however you want. But I think the important takeaway here is that try to have all of your artwork kind of situated, converted, sized, all that stuff before you even get here. Because once you do this, it starts to, the Fantasy Grounds starts to associate the file names and the formatting and all that sort of thing within your campaign. So it's created a record with this list of images. When you start moving these around, renaming them after the fact, it can break your links, and it can also be problematic. So sometimes that'll happen. Like you'll be in the middle of a campaign, and you got this weird image that's, instead of calling it a spider map, you have it as J783421 or something. You have to click on it just to see what it is, and then you're like, oh, okay. And then you come in here and you start renaming it, and then you forget that you already have it linked to an encounter. You have it linked somewhere in your campaign. So when you do that, it messes with the links a little bit. You can always redrag it, fix it that way. But if you do that and then you export it, and then you go to click on the link, it might give you a blank screen with a red question mark, something like that. So once you have these in the campaign, if you change the title or the name, especially on the back end, like in the folder, if you change these names back here and you already have it linked to content in your adventure, you're going to have to go and relink those or redrag them. And you always want to hit this refresh assets before you do that. So if you're going to change anything on the back end, make sure you hit this refresh and then go back and redrag those links if they are part of other things. Like if they're attached to story entries or encounters or whatever, you want to make sure that you redrag them. Otherwise, you're going to get, when you click on the image, it's going to be a question mark. So that can happen occasionally. Okay, so now that I have all these in, now this is considered campaign images. So just because you have them back here in the back end under assets, they're not necessarily available to play on until you make them into campaign map images. So these images are just assets or tiles at this point. Until you import them in and put them here, they're not part of the campaign. So you won't have this view until you add them. So that's kind of an important aspect. The next thing I would do is go through and figure out your priority. Maybe you want to break this up into steps. I'm not going to do all 10 or whatever. What is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 13 maps here. I'm not going to do all of these in one session. I might break that up into 3 or 4 sessions. And also for the sake of streaming and demonstration, I'm not gonna do that a whole thing. So basically, I might take this spider nest or one of these other maps, but I think I want to do a cavern because those seem to be the most problematic when it comes to setting up line of sight and kind of understanding the limitations and that sort of thing. So the first map that I would consider the first map is this entry map. This is where you enter the spider cavern. So I'll do that one. It's really simple. It's pretty spacious. It's not very complex. So I want to go ahead and go into the images. And this is the first map cave entrance. So I'll click that. And now I want to set up my workspace. So as I said, I got all this room here. So I can take this image, make a big square out of it, and drag and drop this. So just in case you're not certain, when you make these images bigger in Fantasy Grounds, like let's say you start off like that, and then you're scrolling up and to zoom in, the larger that image becomes, the more pixels that need to be displayed. So that can also impact performance, especially if you have an older machine with integrated graphics and such. If you don't have enough RAM or you're having issues with a video driver or whatever, just increasing the size of the map also increases the amount of pixels that are displayed. So Fantasy Grounds is pixel bound, so it's very sensitive on video and display memory when you are playing with the size of it. So even if you had a tiny image and you zoom way in like this, it does create more overhead for your computer. So if you're wondering why sometimes you don't have the problem with maps and other times you do, that could have something to do with it. So I'm going to take and right click on this and go to view and then zoom to fit. And this way I have it zoomed out to the extents so we can work on it. And we can see the detail in it. So this is just a cavern entrance. There's a web here. There's like an entrance here. There's a pathway here. There's a pathway here. There's a kind of like the end or an inlet for maybe an underground lake or river. And then here, there's this little pocket here, this alcove, and this is solid right here. So taking a look at the image to see what type of assets you might need and to get a feel for what you might need to do when you're adding line of sight and a grid. So that's the next step, is the grid. So once you have the image up and you're familiar with what you want to do and you kind of have an idea, it's helpful to know the pixels per inch. I know that these are either 50 or 70. And that, I'd requested a certain size so that they would look halfway decent, but then also I would know what they are. So I'm going to go to the grid and turn it on. So these are at 50. So for this scale, this is the map is actually scaled for 50 pixels per inch, which is per square. So I'm going to also change the color. So I'm going to click on tint. I usually use like a yellow so it stands out, and then I just kind of fade the alpha channel, make it a little bit more transparent so it's not so bright, and then hit OK. And that's really the first step. Before you do anything else, add a grid. You can always shut the grid off later, but initially when you're placing things and when you want to see where they are in relation to each other and scale, you want to use the grid. Once the grid is set, you don't have to mess with it generally, but if it doesn't line up, like if you have like doorways and that sort of thing, this will drive you nuts if you don't know the scale. So if you didn't know that it was 50 or 70 or 100 pixels per square inch, and you got to put this on here, it's going to be off. And a lot of cases, the maps that you find online, random ones, are either scaled for Roll20, which is usually 70 or 140 pixels, and Foundry. So those are generally even bigger. Those could be up to 200 pixels. So this depends on what rule set they were made for. And then there's random ones that come out of PDFs and books. Those aren't normally scaled for anything except for a PDF. So you might have to stretch those, or use a map align, which is a tool that kind of helps you straighten that out. But quite often these squares become rectangles and they don't line up in Fantasy Grounds. So if you have a map that already has the grid painted on there, that's going to piss you off, because you're definitely going to have to mess around with it and figure out how to get the grid to line up, or just turn off the grid and just kind of wing it. That's kind of my advice on that. There is a map tool. It's free on the Fantasy Grounds forums. It's called Map Align. You can load an image in there and kind of stretch the image and fix the the squareness, but it's kind of a hassle. So look for quality maps, know the dimensions of formatting, the pixels. That will cut a lot of that drama out. You pick random maps, you're going to get a lot of extra work usually. So this is the main map, and as it is right now, this is the bare minimum. This is what I want. So now what I'm going to do is start adding line of sight. So we got some walls here, so I'm going to do some occluders here on the walls, and then maybe a couple assets. So this is not going to be too hard. So what I want to do is go to the line of sight tool up here on the top. And I also want to make sure that I have the image that I am placing the line of sight on selected. I've seen this happen a lot. What happens is if you click away from the image, then it's going to create another layer which will contain the line of sight. That's not a problem, except for if it goes underneath another tile or another set of line of sight, and you go to interact with it, you can't click on it. So that's the problem with working in layers. You got to make sure you're on the right layer. So before I even lay down anything, I want to make sure I'm clicking on the base layer or the bottom layer, in this case the map. And sometimes if it's locked, it won't let you edit. It'll create a new layer. So make sure the image is unlocked, make sure it's selected, and then start drawing your line of sight. So I'm going to use the select or the pencil tool or the line tool, and then I'm in the wall tool. So those are just the two things. And what I want to do here is on these corners, if you want them to be very straight, you can just click somewhere on here and then hold down the shift key, and then that will create a line, and then end or just make another point. And then I'm just going to come off and just kind of loosely, and I mean that in the most direct way I can think of, is just kind of loosely add points. You don't need a ton of them. You don't need to go through every single little contour. You just kind of want a basic outline. And now that this point's there, I'm going to hit Control and drag this across and make that straight line, and just double click to end the line. So it's going to help you a lot if you learn the behavior of the tool. At first, it's going to be a little awkward, but once you understand the sensitivity of your mouse and also where you're clicking, and then get in the habit of drawing through. See, I didn't even make that. That didn't make it. So later on, when I go into to optimize this, I'm going to pull that up and make sure that's a vertice. One of the things you want to do is try to cut down the amount of points that you have on your map. And you don't need to have every single little nook and cranny on the map itself. So all this stuff here, these edges, you don't want it right up to the edge anyways, because your players won't be able to see the art. And then the other thing is, when you add too many of these points, that adds to the overall lagginess or the performance issues, because Fantasy Grounds is trying to calculate all of these splines as you're moving your tokens around. So you got to be careful with that when you're creating especially for these caverns, they tend to have more points than anything else. So that's why I chose the cavern, because I wanted to kind of point that out. And then you have this drop down where you can get your compass or your navigation panel and use that to move the map around. So you can do that, or you can click on these zoom to fit, and that will recenter the map. So I'm going to keep going with the wall tool, and I'm in the line tool, and I'm just going to go around and do the rest of these. So single click, hold down shift, pull that line down, single click, and then just kind of loosely go through this. So that's kind of how I do cavern walls. This is probably the most tedious and also the most at risk for creating performance issues. And you can see I kind of drew through that. This is what I want. I want that vertice there. I don't care if I didn't land right on the point. What I'm really more concerned about is this corner here, because later on I'm going to go through and clean those up. But for the time being, I'm just getting the main lines in here. And as you can see, I didn't go through and click on every single contour. That's unnecessary. You don't need to do that. And what that will do is create a lot more points that are unnecessary. When you come through here, you want to be able to see some of this stuff, and you don't need to have every single little curve and imperfection on the wall detailed. So let's do this big wall. This will be a big chunk down here. So make sure I'm in the line tool and the wall tool. So I always check that before I move anything or before I draw. Because sometimes you'll be in the selection tool and you're trying to draw a line. You're like, what's going on? Well, you're in the wrong tool. Or sometimes you want to move a point and you're in the drawing mode and you go, oh crap, I just drew that. So I'm just going to hit escape. So make sure you're in the right tool for the right process. So you have a selection tool, you have a line tool, you have a square rectangle tool, and you have an ellipse. That's something you got to break that habit. When I first started doing this, I was always, seems like I was in the middle of selecting a point and I was trying to move it. And then I'm trying to draw a line. I'm like, what's going on? We forget to switch over to the correct tool. So get in the habit of knowing where you're at, because that's going to drive you nuts. And it did me anyways. I couldn't figure it out. I don't know what the problem was, but every time I tried to draw something, I would be in the wrong tool, and it just irritated the crap out of me. So try to break that habit. Get in the habit of looking to see where you're at before you start drawing or before you edit. So that's kind of an important step to learn the behavior of Fantasy Grounds. Is you got to be able to toggle between these tools. You got to kind of know where you're at before you start doing stuff. So I'm in the wall tool, which is line of sight, and selection tool is for moving stuff around or stretching the images. So I want to make sure I'm in the line tool if you're going to do, a bunch of random lines. I could take this ellipse tool and just do a big circle around there, but that's not going to look natural, and then I still have to move points around anyway. So I'm just going to use the line tool and just casually go through and add some points. So this is kind of like an alcove. I remember requesting that for some reason. I think there was going to be a guardian or something like that hiding in there. So that's why I requested that the cartographer created that alcove in there. It's kind of a dark, shadowy alcove. And then once I get to here, you can try to click on that, but it may not snap to it, especially if you're zoomed way out. You won't be able to tell. So you're better off just, you can just click here, double click, end the line, and to make that vertice. Because you're going to come back and clean it up anyway. So it's not going to kill anything. So that's that point. And then later on, I'll adjust any of these, how far in or out I'd like them to go. But just the main part of this is to get those points on there. So single click down in this corner. I'm going to do this section down here. And I want to single click in the corner, hold down the shift key, drag this over. And that's going to give me the straight line. And then I'm just going to kind of randomly click through here and just kind of get a little bit of the shape. I'm kind of following the contour, but I don't care if it's like every single little nook and cranny. And again, I'm just going to draw through and make that little point here, because this is where they tend to break, is when you don't connect them and you don't notice it until you zoom all the way in. So for some reason, this did not make a vertice where I thought it would. So I might pick this up and do something like that. Make sure that that's actually, a good point. And I'm not sure what happened, but I think it's because it's at the edge of the map. So I'm not too worried about it, but that's kind of weirdness we're seeing lately with the map tools. So that is that. I think I have one more, up here. So here's another section. So again, I think I'm going to draw two more groups, and then this will be done for that part of it. So again, single click on a starting point, hold down the shift key, and make sure I'm in the drawing tool. See, I was in the selection tool. I got to go to the drawing tool, the line tool. Single click, hold down shift, drag it. I think I'll hold shift again for this corner, and then just freehand it without holding shift. And when you're moving your mouse around and making these points, you don't have to hold down the mouse button. You don't want to do that unless you're trying to trace something. And even then, see, this is the vertice. I don't know what's going on here, but it's off. So we'll worry about that later. It worked up here, but for some reason it's not working now. And now over here, in a single click, hold shift to give me the straight line, and then just kind of loosely add the rest of these lines in here. Yeah, see, that's off. That vertice it should be on here, but it's displaying over here. Something is off. All right, so now once you have all of those line of sight points laid out, depending on the map and what you're going to be doing, you might want to do the rest of your stuff. So if you have terrain or glass or windows and doors, you can do all that. But I usually work on one tool at a time. So I'm going to go to selection mode now, and I'm going to make my little changes and fixes. So maybe you want this backed up a little bit. Maybe you want to bring this forward. You'd make your little changes. And here I was telling you that I'd probably drag this through. And there's the vertice I was looking for. And what you do on these points is you can single click and click delete. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Single click, hit delete. Yeah, there we go. Single click, delete. I don't know what it's doing. It's not it's not completing yeah, something's goofy with the map tools, but basically that's what I'm trying to do is, I don't know why it's doing that, but you're supposed to be able to select this point, but it's not connecting here. I don't know why it's not snapping here. If I drag this, then it does. I don't know what's happening. It's like it's off by so many pixels. It's only supposed to delete the segment, not the whole line from here to here. So let me try this. So I'm gonna draw a line through. Yeah, see, it only made one segment. So it's supposed to do two. Yeah, something's broken here. So if I double click on that, hit delete. Yeah, something is really messed up. Yeah, they still have to work on this because I know they've been having trouble with it. All right, so we'll move on from there. But for some reason, some of the points are not crossing, or they're not creating the vertice. So I have no idea why. It's something to do with the way they have the line of sight. And I don't know. This is a Carl thing, so no idea how this works. But anyhow, so if I click on that point, it should, see, that's how it's supposed to work. And then this thing here, can I move that? Yeah, see, it's not even letting me. Yeah, that is so weird. Yeah, they definitely need to fix the map tools. It's jacked up quite a bit. So, yeah, not able to, points aren't being created randomly. See, like here, that should already be, this should be a point that I can click on, and see, now it's not even making a point here. So yeah, that's pretty messed up. So let me see if I can draw another line and join those together. I should probably edit this video and give it to Carl so they can look at it. But yeah, I can't even, this is crazy. See, now when I drew that line, it worked. So I don't know what's going on here. So like a continuous line for some reason isn't working very well. All right, so that and that. Now we could take this line. Yes, that's a lot of extra work if you have to keep doing that. But anyways, you delete those little tails off of there, and you can make your adjustments on these lines here. It's almost like a long continuous line will not allow you to see. This isn't going to work either. I can already tell it didn't make a point here. So what I'm going to do is delete this point. See if we can get that to, there we go. So all I'm doing is going through and cleaning up the edges, if there are any edges, and just kind of making some minor adjustments here. Yep, not sure what's happening, but that is kind of a weird problem. I haven't seen that. And it has something to do with all the changes they made a couple months ago. That's when all these, see now that's it's deleting the whole line. It's not supposed to do that. So there should be a vertice forming here. So what I would have to do, this is really crazy. So go with this line. See, even doing that, it's not making the vertices. And I'm on the same layer. So I have no idea what's going on with this. So double click. See, it's, yeah, it's acting really goofy. It's not joining the links. It won't let you cross over. But it's good enough. It's joined enough for me right now. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. But anyway, so this is you get rid of the little tails, make your fine adjustments. Like this stuff in here, I don't know if that's going to work or not. Yep, there we go. So probably bring this stuff down a little bit, bring this in. There we go. So just kind of going through and making those fine adjustments. There we go. So that's a real basic map, and you can see it's not too complex or anything. So what you could do now is, if you wanted to, you could add the water effect here, and then you can add some mist in here. If you have the assets, you can add more webs if you think it's necessary. I might put a cobweb-like thing right in here. I think I'll first do the water. So what I'm going to do is go to down here at the bottom, effects mode. And what I want to do is take and, oops, whoa, what happened? So clicking on effects, that just totally erased everything. That is so weird. Let me delete that layer, see if that helps. Yeah, all the line of sight just went away. How weird. Yep, that's not the right behavior. I mean, I could see, yeah, I don't know what happened there. So all the line of sight data is either hidden or something happened. But as soon as I added that effect layer, it all went away. Yeah, see now it's in tile mode. Let's go back to line of sight. There we go. All right, try it again. So go to effects. I might have clicked on the wrong spot. And then go to the drop down and go to water. And that will put it on this entire map. So what I'm going to do is click on mask. That will block it so you don't see it on the whole mask, and just unveil this part here. So hold down the Alt key and trace around here where the water line is. And just go from there. It's not going to be very visible because the area is pretty small. So you have to decide if it's even worth it or not. But if the players get close enough and they zoom in to this area, they'll be able to see that it's water. But let me increase the intensity a little bit. Decrease that, maybe put it just a tiny bit of blur. Okay, so there's the water effect. And like I said, without the lighting, it's going to be hard to see. So what I'll do is go to lighting and go to ambient lighting, and maybe I'll just put it on dusk for now, so we have a little bit of ambient light. Yep. But when the players come close to this area and they have a torch, they'll be able to see that. All right, so back to line of sight, and let's go to tile mode. And I'm going to add a few assets, nothing major, but the fungus gives off some kind of some ambient light, or like some kind of like radiant light. So maybe I'll put some light in here so that it kind of illuminates this area a little more. Maybe I'll make it a bluish color to kind of match the water, or whatever color these fungi are, kind of this brownish red color. I can do that. I think the bluish color would look cooler. So what I'm going to do is go to lights, and I'm going to click on this light bulb, and that's going to be ambient light. And I want to make sure I got it clicked on the layer that I want to put it on. In this case, this will be the map layer. If you want to do it in separate rooms, then you can have separate groups of lighting, but this is going to illuminate pretty much the whole cavern. So I want to make sure I'm on the lighting, and we want probably just the, let's go with I think a pulse would look kind of cool, but it would be too artificial. So let's just I'll use the torch, I guess, or lantern. And I will use torch. It's pretty common. And then change the color. So I want to use some of the color from the pond here. So I'll use the pointer tool and use some of this color here to help determine it's going to be too dark if I use that. So we'll do this light blue. And then what I'll do is I'll just start placing this around randomly at where I believe the lighting should come from. So these little patches of fungi are giving off bioluminescent glow. So that will help with the darkness problem that we were experiencing earlier. Maybe a little bit up here. Just enough to give it some ambient light so it's not so dark in here. Now what I'll do is I'll go back to the lighting and go back to the ambient lighting, and I'll change this back to, I'll just make this moonlight, and then we'll see what this looks like in the player view. So that's what it's going to look like once the players get on the map. So that looks pretty cool. So it kind of gives that more of a strange look to it. But I like this dark alcove thing. That's pretty cool. And you can see the flickering going on here a little bit. All right, so that's kind of cool. Now I'm just going to turn that off temporarily so that we can work. We don't get confused. That's usually I have to turn it on and off several times because sometimes it will distract me, and I just can focus on where I'm going to be placing things. So I'm going to go to tile layers mode, and I want to look up an asset for the webs because I want to put some webbing in here, some moving kind of breathing stuff. So I want to make sure I'm in the images section and not all. I want to be in images because that's where the art asset packs are stored. And I want to search for animated web, I guess. Okay, so there's two different ones. There's this kind of this corner-like stuff, and then there's this kind of big overall thing. So I think I'll use this corner stuff and drag and drop it into the tile section here. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Whoops, what did I do? Oh, wow, I replaced the map. I had the map image selected. Oh, man. Oh, let's see. I'm going to fix that. So go back into images. I want to put this map cave thing back here. What? What am I doing wrong here? Okay, so I accidentally replaced the whole map with that asset. That was a no-go. Okay, so tile mode, stamp, okay. Now go back to images. Huh? What's happening? What did I do? Okay, let's try that again. So that technically should be adding at least the tile. Well, I probably have to go back to my image assets. Let's go to the home, campaign, spider maps. Wow, what a mess. So put that in there. There we go. So this should be that. All right, we'll see if I fix it or not. And let's see. So this should be under. And let's go back, turn on line of sight and such, see if that works. Yeah, see, I messed it all up. Definitely messed it up. Yeah, so word to the wise. So that's all I was trying to do is put on this webbing, and I accidentally replaced the. Yeah, that's a mess. Yeah, I accidentally replaced this image. I don't know why I did that, but I did. Okay, so there's that. Okay, so there's the line of sight. So not sure what happened there, but yeah, that is a mess. Okay, so that's obviously bigger. I see. Okay, so put that there. Bring this thing. This thing needs to be bigger. This image here. See, it's supposed to fit in there. Yeah, I really hose this. So don't feel bad if you're having problems with this because it's so easy to do. Sometimes it's like, oh my god. Yeah, I really jacked that up. But you can see the line of sight now. It's on a separate layer. Don't really want to do that if you can help it, because that is going to be a big mess. And you can see I've already messed this up pretty good. Yeah, that's kind of jacked up. But basically, all I was trying to do is put that in there. Now I can revert the map. So if you run into this and you want to start over, you can revert. Let me see if I can lock this, see if that will do it. But it will, sometimes you can right click and revert, or you could go up here and there's got to be a revert. I thought there was a revert image somewhere up in these tools. Yeah, that's pretty messed up. And I tried to do Control Z. Let's see if that will fix my problem. Yeah, it's probably too far back. Okay. So let's see what we got here. Yeah, I kind of fixed it. So I went to Control Z and I was able to kind of back that out. But I think I lost some of the lighting stuff, but that's okay. At least I was able to get back. So I clicked on the asset and then I hit Control Z. I was able to undo that. So I'm going to actually probably remove this layer. So delete and move the water back on top instead of on the bottom. There we go. Yay, I was able to get out of it. Okay, no big deal. So at this point, I want to check now to see where we're at here. And go back to lighting, ambient lighting. Yeah, so I'm still on dusk, so I wanted to go to moonlight. There we go. All right, so what I was trying to do before was just add a little bit more web in this area so that when you move around in here, okay, so I got to place more of those. So here we have these lighting, and all I'm going to be doing is placing more of that. So I lost a little bit of the lighting, which isn't bad. I went back too far. I mean, I could do Control Y. So if you go too far back and you want to fix that, just do Control Y. That will redo. Control Z will undo. But I don't care at this point. I'm just going to be adding a little bit for this glow. There we go. So there's the water. Yeah, see, I didn't. I was supposed to click on this layer here. Oh well. It's a separate layer now. Who cares? And why is it off so much? I must have accidentally moved it. Okay, whatever. All right, so now that we have that, we're going to be doing is I was going to try to add the web asset, and that's when I accidentally messed up the map. So let's go back to images, and we're going to go to animated web. And hit search. There we go. So I'm going to go back to this and create a different layer. Or I can click on this. But see, what happens is when I click on this layer, it selects that, which is this whole tile. And you got to be careful. So I guess I'll deselect that and then go to, that will create its own layer, hopefully. You got to be in tile mode. And then click on this, and there we go. So here's the image size. So it's 14 by 14. I don't think I need it that big. So there we go. So if you're going to add any webs in here, you could do something like that and then rotate it. So that way it gets placed the way you want it. But I don't think it's worth it in this case. I don't think I need it because I got enough web display here where I don't really need it. So I'm just going to forget that. Okay, so we have the water. We have the actual tile with the line of sight on it, and then the lights are on a separate layer, which isn't a big deal. And when you're done, then you can lock it so you don't accidentally move it. But what is that? That's the lights. There we go. Now the lighting is lined up. Yeah, not sure why is that like that? It's like this is such weird behavior. Let's see. So the lights are off a little bit. Oops. Or maybe they're not. Maybe it's the map image. Yeah, I think it's this thing here. So over and up one. Yeah, it's still jacked up. I don't know what I did, but lighting is off now. Yeah, see, that's what one thing will happen to you sometimes is you'll get the wrong layers selected and you'll run into this sort of thing. So I could try to fix that by, let's see, here's the lighting. I could go and, try to shrink it. And yeah, see, now it's grabbing that. Yeah, this behavior on the map tools is really wacky. Yeah, I don't know why it keeps switching, but that is where this is confusing me. Yeah, see, now it's grabbing the whole thing, and I was just trying to grab this layer. So not sure what's up, but yeah, this is really messed up. You could see it. Huh, how fun is that? So we got some multiple things here. So I'm chasing some kind of weird issues with the map tools, but then I'm also making my own mistakes on top of that. So this is the sort of thing that you're going to experience, especially if you're new to Fantasy Grounds and you haven't messed with the tools. And I haven't played with it in a while, so it's definitely different. Behavior is different, and I'm not sure if this is a bug or if I'm doing something wrong. But in this case, I think it's a combination of both. So honestly, at this point, I think I'm going to report this onto the forums because there's something definitely wrong with this. It's just the behavior is so wacky right now, and it's not behaving at all like I'd expect. Like it's just, yeah. I mean, I'm making my mistakes on top of errors, so that sucks. Anyways, folks, you guys have a good weekend. I'm gonna call it, and I'm gonna send this to Smiteworks to see what's going on. Hopefully, they can figure it out. But you guys take care. And what I'm gonna do is type /console because that's how you bring up the console to report errors like the logs. And then you hit compile logs, and that's basically, it'll save it on your hard drive. And then I'm going to send that to Carl. And I'm also going to zip this up so they can see the images I'm working with and the campaign data and see if they can recreate it. So you guys take care. Have a wonderful afternoon, and don't fret. It's just a learning process. Plus, there's something going on with the map tool, so it's not all just us. Like there's other things going on sometimes. I'm not sure, but ever since they changed it in I think October, it's been really weird. So anyhow, folks, you guys take care, and I'll see you around next time. Bye bye.